Death doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes a soul leaves the body so suddenly, so violently, that it doesn't realize what has happened. It continues walking, talking, trying to interact with a world that can no longer see it. Trapped in a moment between two realities, confused, desperate, unable to understand why no one responds. This is the story of Marco Benedetti, a man who died on a rainy November night in 1961, but didn't know it. And Padre Pio, the stigmatized priest who could see both worlds simultaneously, witnessed something few living humans ever have. The exact moment a soul realizes it's dead. The confusion, the denial, the terror, and finally, the devastating acceptance. What happened in that monastery chapel over the course of 3 hours defies everything we think we know about death. It reveals what the dying see in their final moments, and it proves that the transition from life to death is far more complex, far more merciful, and far more terrifying than any of us can imagine. If you've ever wondered what happens in those first moments after death, subscribe now. Because this story will change how you see the boundary between this world and the next. Let me take you to the moment when everything changed, for Marco and for everyone who heard what Padre Pio witnessed. Marco Benedetti was 42 years old, a truck driver hauling produce between Naples and Foggia. He had a wife, Daniela, and 2 teenage daughters. He was healthy, strong, careful on the roads. November 12, 1961, was supposed to be a routine run. It was raining, the kind of torrential downpour that turns Italian mountain roads into rivers. Marco's truck navigated the winding highway through the Apennines, windshield wipers struggling against the deluge. He was thinking about his daughter's upcoming birthday, mentally calculating whether he'd finish this route in time to be home for the celebration. Then, the curve. Marco remembered turning the wheel, remembered the truck beginning to slide on the rain-slicked asphalt, remembered a moment of weightlessness as the vehicle left the road. And then, nothing. No impact, no pain, no sound of metal crushing, just a strange discontinuity, like a film reel skipping forward without transition. Suddenly, Marco was standing beside his truck on the shoulder of the road. The rain had stopped. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that feels unnatural, oppressive. What the hell? Marco looked at his truck. It was intact. No damage. The engine was still running, headlights cutting through the fog. He must have swerved, avoided the crash, pulled over safely. That had to be it, except he couldn't remember doing any of those things. Marco climbed back into the truck cab, or tried to. His hand passed through the door handle. He stared at his hand, confused. Tried again. Same result. It was like touching smoke. "I'm exhausted," he muttered, hallucinating from fatigue. He decided to walk. There was a monastery nearby, San Giovanni Rotondo, where that famous priest lived. Padre Pio. Marco had heard of him but never visited. Maybe the monks could help, let him rest, call his wife. The walk felt strange. His feet made no sound on the gravel. He felt no cold despite the November chill. And when he tried to light a cigarette, his lighter wouldn't work. The flame appeared but provided no heat, and the cigarette remained unlit. Something was very wrong. Marco reached the monastery gates just as dawn broke. A young monk was sweeping the courtyard. Marco called out to him. "Excuse me, brother, I need help." The monk didn't respond, didn't even look up. "Hey, I'm talking to you." Nothing. The monk continued sweeping, passing within inches of Marco, and walked right through the space where Marco stood. That's when panic began to claw at Marco's chest. That's when the terrible possibility started to form in his mind, a thought so horrifying he refused to accept it. And that's when he heard a voice behind him, gentle but infinitely sad. "Marco, you need to come with me." He turned. Padre Pio stood there, his stigmata-marked hands folded in prayer, looking directly at Marco with eyes that saw everything. "You can see me," Marco breathed, relief flooding through him. "Thank God. Something's wrong with me. I think I'm sick. No one else can see or hear me. That monk just walked right through. Come inside, Marco." Padre Pio's voice was infinitely compassionate. "We need to talk." Marco followed the priest into a small private chapel. The room was simple. Stone walls, wooden pews, a crucifix above the altar. Votive candles flickered in the early morning dimness. Padre Pio gestured to a pew. Marco sat, or thought he did. He felt the wood beneath him, but when he looked down, he could see through his own legs to the floor below. "What's happening to me?" Marco's voice cracked. "Am I losing my mind?" Padre Pio sat beside him, his weathered face filled with sorrow. "Marco, what's the last thing you remember, before you ended up here?" "I was driving. There was rain. A curve. My truck started to slide and—" Marco stopped. "And then I was standing beside the road. But the truck was fine. I was fine. I just couldn't. I couldn't touch anything." "Do you remember the impact?" "What impact? There was no impact. I told you the truck is fine." "Marco." Padre Pio's gentle interruption cut through the denial. "Your truck went over the embankment. It rolled 3 times before hitting a tree. The impact was instantaneous." No, you're wrong. I would remember that. I would remember. You died, Marco, at 11:47 last night. Your body is still in the truck at the bottom of the ravine. The police haven't found it yet." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Marco stood abruptly, backing away. "You're insane. I'm not dead. I'm standing right here. I'm talking to you. Dead people don't talk." "Your soul is talking to me. I have the gift of seeing both worlds simultaneously. Right now, I see you as you believe yourself to be, whole, alive. But I also see your body 3 kilometers from here, trapped in twisted metal." "Liar!" Marco's shout echoed through the chapel, though no one else in the monastery could hear it. "I'm going home. I'm going to see Daniela and my daughters and prove you're wrong." He ran from the chapel, through the monastery doors, into the morning light. Padre Pio didn't follow. He simply knelt and began to pray, because he'd witnessed this before. The first stage, denial. And he knew what came next would break Marco Benedetti's soul in ways the accident never could. The soul's journey of accepting death had only just begun. and Padre Pio would be there for every agonizing moment of it. Marco ran, or what felt like running. His feet made no impact on the ground, created no sound. The world around him seemed simultaneously real and dreamlike, colors slightly muted, sounds distant and hollow. He reached the road and tried to flag down a passing car. The vehicle drove straight through him. "This isn't real," Marco muttered. "It's a nightmare. I'll wake up." But he didn't wake up. It took him what felt like hours to reach his home in Foggia, a modest two-story house with blue shutters where his family waited. Except time felt strange now, elastic. He couldn't tell if minutes or hours had passed. He burst through the front door, literally through it, his body passing through solid wood like it was air. His wife, Daniela, sat at the kitchen table, her face buried in her hands. His daughters, Sophia and Claudia, stood beside her, both crying. A police officer sat across from them, his cap in his hands, speaking in low, somber tones. "We found the truck about an hour ago at the bottom of the ravine off Route 89, the officer was saying. "The rain last night. The roads were treacherous. I'm so sorry, Signora Benedetti. Your husband didn't survive the crash." "No!" Marco shouted. "I'm right here. Daniela, I'm right here." She didn't respond, didn't even look up. Marco fell to his knees beside his wife, reaching for her hand. His fingers passed through hers like mist. He tried to touch her face, to wipe away her tears. Nothing. He was invisible, intangible, a ghost in his own home. "Please," he sobbed. "Please see me. I'm not dead. I'm here. I'm right here with you." Sophia, his eldest daughter, suddenly looked up, directly at the spot where Marco knelt. For one heart-stopping moment, Marco thought she could see him. "Did you feel that?" Sophia whispered. "It got cold all of a sudden." "It's just the window," Claudia said through tears. "Papa always said that window leaked air." But Sophia kept staring, her eyes searching. "Papa, are you here?" "Yes," Marco screamed. "Sophia, I'm here. Baby, I'm right here." She shivered and looked away. "I'm being stupid. He's gone." The words shattered something in Marco. He watched his family grieve, watched them make phone calls to relatives, watched his wife arrange for his funeral. A funeral for a man who was standing invisible beside them, screaming into a void that wouldn't answer. Hours passed, or days. Time had lost all meaning. Finally, broken and defeated, Marco returned to the monastery. Padre Pio was still in the chapel, kneeling in the same position, as if he'd never moved. When Marco entered, the priest looked up with eyes full of compassion. "I'm dead, aren't I?" Marco's voice was hollow, all fight gone. "I'm really dead." "Yes, my son, you are." Marco collapsed onto the chapel floor, or what felt like collapsing. His spiritual form seemed to fold in on itself, all the strength that had sustained his denial finally giving out. "Why can't I remember dying?" His voice was raw with anguish. "Why don't I remember the pain, the impact? Why did I just skip forward? Padre Pio moved beside him, sitting on the cold stone floor with the grace of someone who'd spent a lifetime in prayer. God's mercy, he said simply. The human mind cannot process its own destruction. So in that final moment, the soul is spared. You experienced the beginning of the fall and then woke in the after. The trauma in between was hidden from you. Mercy? Marco's laugh was bitter. Where's the mercy in making me watch my family grieve? In letting me try to touch my wife and pass right through her? In keeping me here, aware, when I should just stop existing? You haven't crossed over yet because you're not ready. The soul needs time to accept what's happened. Some souls understand immediately. They see their bodies, comprehend their death, and move toward the light within moments. Others, Padre Pio gestured at Marco. Others fight, deny, cling to the world they knew. How long have I been dead? 36 hours. Marco's mind reeled. It had felt like minutes, like hours, but not a full day and a half. My funeral? When is it? Tomorrow. Your body was recovered this morning. They're preparing it now. Fresh anguish tore through Marco. I need to be there. I need to see them one more time. You can be there, Padre Pio said gently. But Marco, you need to understand something. Being present at your own funeral is one of the hardest experiences a soul can endure. Watching your loved ones say goodbye when you cannot respond, it will break you in ways you can't imagine. I don't care. I have to be there. Padre Pio nodded slowly. Then I'll be there too. You won't face this alone. Marco looked at the priest with new understanding. You've done this before. Guided dead souls. How many? More than I can count. I see death constantly. Souls lingering, confused, angry, terrified. Most move on quickly once they understand. But some, his eyes grew distant. Some need help crossing over. They need someone who can see them, speak to them, guide them through the transition. And after the funeral? What happens to me then? Padre Pio's expression was unreadable. That depends on what you choose. Every soul has a choice, Marco. Heaven beckons. But you have to be willing to let go of this world and embrace what comes next. And if I can't let go? The priest's silence was answer enough. Some souls never crossed over. Some remained trapped forever, watching a world they could no longer touch. The funeral was held at Chiesa di San Francesco in Foggia. November 15th, 1961. A gray morning with clouds threatening rain. Marco stood invisible at the back of the church as mourners filed in. His truck-driving colleagues, neighbors, distant relatives he barely remembered. And there, in the front row, his family. Daniela in black, her face aged 10 years in 3 days. Sophia and Claudia on either side of her, holding their mother's trembling hands. The casket sat before the altar. Closed. Too damaged, they'd said. Better to remember him as he was. Marco approached it slowly, his spiritual form drawn to the physical shell he'd inhabited for 42 years. He could feel the body inside. Cold, empty, a discarded garment. His soul recoiled from it instinctively. That wasn't him anymore. That was just meat and bone, returning to dust. But his family thought that casket contained all that remained of Marco Benedetti. Padre Pio stood in the corner of the church, visible only to Marco. The priest had traveled to Foggia specifically for this moment. His presence was the only anchor Marco had between two worlds. The Mass began. Father Giuseppe, the parish priest, spoke of resurrection and eternal life. Words Marco had heard 1,000 times, but never truly understood until now. Then came the eulogies. Daniela stood first, her voice breaking. He was my everything. 20 years of marriage and I still felt butterflies when he walked through the door. He was supposed to come home last Tuesday for Rosa's birthday party this weekend. He promised he'd be there. He never broke a promise. She couldn't continue. Sophia helped her back to the pew. Marco tried to reach for his wife. His hand passed through her shoulder. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Daniela, I'm so sorry." Then Sophia stood, 16 years old, trying to be strong for her mother. "My dad taught me how to ride a bike, how to change a tire, how to stand up to bullies at school. He told me I could be anything I wanted, that I was smart and brave and—" Her voice cracked. "How am I supposed to do any of that without him?" Marco felt something inside him tear. The last threads connecting him to this world were fraying, the pain too great to bear. Claudia spoke last. 14, her father's baby. "I never got to say goodbye. That's what hurts the most. He left for work and I didn't even hug him. I was angry about something stupid. I can't even remember what. And now I'll never—" "I'm here!" Marco screamed, falling to his knees. "I'm right here. I forgive you. I love you. Please, God, let them hear me just once." But they couldn't. And in that moment, Marco Benedetti finally understood what it meant to be dead. Padre Pio appeared beside him, placing a hand on his spiritual shoulder, the first touch Marco had felt in 3 days. "It's time, Marco. They need to let you go, and you need to let them go." The funeral ended. The casket was carried to the cemetery. Marco followed, invisible, watching as his body was lowered into the ground. Earth fell on polished wood. Final prayers were spoken, and slowly the mourners dispersed, leaving only Daniela and the girls standing at the graveside. Marco stood with them, separated by an invisible barrier he could never cross. "This is it, isn't it?" he said to Padre Pio, who remained beside him. "This is where I have to choose. Yes, you can stay, become one of the lingering souls who haunt the places they loved, watching life continue without them. Some do. They become trapped in their own grief, unable to move forward." Padre Pio's voice was gentle but firm. "Or you can accept what's happened and cross over. Let go of this world and embrace what awaits you." "I'm afraid." Marco's admission came raw and honest. "What if there's nothing? What if I just stop existing? Look up, Marco." Marco lifted his gaze from his family to the sky above, and suddenly he saw it. Light. Not the sun. Something else. Something that had been there all along, but he'd been too focused on the earthly realm to notice. A luminous presence hovering at the edge of his perception, warm and inviting, pulsing with a love so profound it made everything else seem insignificant. "That's been waiting for you since the moment you died," Padre Pio said. "Heaven isn't a distant place you travel to. It's here, all around us, separated from this world by the thinnest of veils. All you have to do is choose to see it." Marco felt something loosening in his chest. The fear, the attachment, the desperate clinging to life. He looked at his wife one more time, at his daughters. He wanted to memorize every detail of their faces. "Will they be okay?" he whispered. "In time. Grief is the price of love, Marco. They loved you deeply, so they'll grieve deeply. But they'll heal. They'll remember you with joy instead of sorrow. They'll live full lives. And one day, when their own time comes, you'll be there to welcome them home." The thought brought Marco strange comfort. This wasn't goodbye forever, just goodbye for now. He took a step toward the light. It grew brighter, warmer. "Wait," Padre Pio called softly. "Before you go, I want you to understand something. What you experienced, the confusion, the denial, the grief of watching your family mourn, that happens to every soul. Death isn't a switch that flips. It's a journey, a transition, and God's mercy is present in every moment of it." "Why?" Marco asked. "Why make us go through this pain?" "Because acceptance requires understanding. You needed to see your family, to realize they would survive your loss, to release them from the guilt of moving forward without you. You needed to forgive yourself for dying, for leaving them, for not saying goodbye." Padre Pio's eyes shimmered with tears. "Death isn't just about the body stopping. It's about the soul learning to let go of everything it thought it needed to survive, and then discovering it doesn't need any of it, because love transcends death, and you carry their love with you into eternity." Marco nodded, understanding flooding through him. He was ready. He turned fully toward the light, and as he did, his spiritual form began to change, becoming brighter, less defined, merging with the luminous presence that called him home. In his final moment on earth, Marco looked back at Daniela, and though she couldn't see him, couldn't hear him, he spoke anyway. "I love you. Tell the girls I love them, and don't grieve too long. Live. Please. Live." A breeze stirred the cemetery trees. Just a coincidence, perhaps. But Daniela looked up, and for the briefest moment, she smiled through her tears. Marco Benedetti stepped into the light, and in an instant that felt like both seconds and eternity, he understood everything. Death wasn't an ending. It was a doorway, and on the other side was a love so complete, so overwhelming, that every moment of confusion and grief had been worth it just to finally come home. Padre Pio watched the soul ascend, then knelt beside the fresh grave and prayed. He'd witnessed this transition hundreds of times, but it never stopped moving him, because every time he saw the same thing. The moment a soul realizes death isn't the end of love. It's love perfected. If this story touched you deeply, if you've lost someone and wondered if they're okay, leave a comment sharing their name. They're not gone. They're just on the other side of a veil thinner than we imagine. and one day you'll see them again. Subscribe to hear more stories that reveal the mysteries of death, the power of the soul, and the eternal nature of love. Because understanding death isn't morbid, it's liberating. This is what Padre Pio witnessed. This is what happens when a soul realizes it has died. This is the journey we'll all take someday, and it's more beautiful than we can possibly imagine.